Handshake.
Pete Feenstra talking to Graham Parker, band leader, singer-songwriter, author, and now Hollywood film star.
Exactly.
Unbelievable, Graham.
Yeah. Put that bit in the bigger lights, will you please?
And I should mention while we're on it, YouTube star.
Well,
Got your own little thing going on there as well?
I've got my own
Was that an
show.
inspiration for Hollywood?
Well, you know, it gave me some practice because I did 2 of those shows before the movie.
Yeah.
Episode 1 and 2 of the Graham Parker show.
Which you should check out.
And I got, you know, a bit of practice in, you know, shall we say, acting, as we call it.
Yeah. Did you script all that, such as it was?
Yeah, I did a storyboard and got my son to help out. He's good with cameras, although it was done on a little thing called a Zoom Q3 about that big.
Right.
It was on a tiny little thing.
Yeah.
So to make it look cheap, I didn't want it to look too good.
It looks edgy.
It's edgy.
That's
okay,
very cool.
euphemistically, yeah.
Yeah.
And the third one I think was the best, episode 3, where Alan Purvey gets his own show called Marvellous, isn't it? The Alan Purvey Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, marvellous, isn't it? Yeah, he's a bit of a lad,
And that's caught on.
that's cool.
And everything else in your career has caught on lately. And for a guy who apparently doesn't plan things, you've got an album out. You've got this brand new DVD out called This Is Live.
Yeah.
And you've got a documentary out. Oh, it's out already?
Well, it isn't released on actual hard copy yet, but it was on the BBC, as you probably know, BBC 4, and got incredible response from people. People liked it a lot. And I think,
Don't Ask Me Questions.
Don't Ask Me Questions, yeah. And I think the filmmaker, the Gramalia brothers, have somebody now who is ready to put it out. So it's just been on at the CBGB Festival in New York.
So what was the actual chronology, time-wise, between those projects?
All these things, yeah.
Yeah, and the rumour coming together, which I should have said at the outset.
Yeah, if we start from the rumour thing, that was probably around April 2011. When I had a bunch of songs and I had an idea to use Steve, the drummer, and Andrew, the bass player, original Rumour members who haven't played together for a long time. I've played with individual, and I thought it'd be great to do a trio in the studio live, and then I would add lead guitar,
and yet the trio situation is far removed from what the Rumour actually is.
Well,
with 2 guitars and a keyboard.
It's a big dense machine, absolutely. So Steve made a joke about, what if you got Martin, Bob and Brinsley? That'd be a proper band. That was all he said. And he said, kidding. And I, without thinking about it, emailed everyone.
And you went for it.
And immediately they got back and said yes. And then a week later, Judd Apatow called me out of the blue. I met with him, and he said there may be a spot in this movie.
And you didn't know him before?
No, he'd used one of my songs in Undeclared, one of his shows.
Right.
So, you know, then I dropped it on him. Well, I said, guess what? I've reunited the Room. We're going to do an album in July. This is 2011 still.
Yeah, when you
And then he gets back to me within a week and says, okay, I want you in the movie, and I want the Room to do a 2-day shoot, do about 12 songs.
But didn't you specifically ask him for the Rumour to be in there?
Well, when I mentioned it, you know, that I'd reform them, which he thought I'd never do, and nobody thought I'd never do. He was a bit like, and I said, you should get them in your movie.
So was that a sign of a commitment to further gigs with them on your part?
Well, but by the time, you know, then we did the record in July, and then the movie shooting started later in the year. Right. And I was there for 2 weeks doing, you know, small bits in and out, whatever. And then the Rumour thing, and then me doing some more. So that was all at the end of 2011. Yeah. By then the album was in the can. Yeah. But we had to hold it up until late 2012 because Judd's movie wasn't coming out until Christmas 2012. Okay, so that's a lot of planning. Yeah, well, a lot of planning, but I didn't really, you know, do a lot. I just said to my agent, get some gigs, and then went on vacation. You know.
All right.
Yeah, did nothing.
But you had all the songs in the can.
Yeah, all the songs we'd recorded them with the Rumour. We made 3 Chords Good, Judd Apatow, and my the documentarians filmed the whole recording session. So some of it is on the DVD or the Blu-ray of Judd's movie. Yeah. And coming up to the This Is Live, basically that's us doing 2 days of shooting. We do 12 numbers over and over again for 2 days, starting at 9 in the morning. Audience of extras.
This is the one with it,
with a beautiful theatre called the Glasgow in LA. Yeah. And Judd had always said, you know, Judd and the music supervisor said, you know, it'd be great to put this out as a standalone thing. Yeah. And I said, I'll take whatever comes. If it happens, it happens, and it has.
Was it the case that that shoot that we're talking about, the one in Los Angeles, was that the actual first time you'd played together for?
Yeah, that was the first time on stage. That's why it's kind of a historic DVD, because it's literally our first time since '79 as a whole entire band.
And were you kind of inhibited at all by the processes of cameras and everything, and the angles and stuff?
You can't call it a live show in as much as it's in a club and you're letting things hang a bit.
Yeah.
But, I knew that in the movie, this is 40, there was going to be a clip like that, blink and you miss it.
Yeah.
Out of 2 days.
Yeah.
That's what it was going to be, apart from me doing a bit of acting at the work, which at the end of the show, the performances, which may or may not make it, you don't know.
Yeah.
Especially with Judd, he films more than
I think a lot of people do.
And there's so much that he films. Yeah. Take after take, ad-libs after ad-libs, all kinds of different stuff. Whole things that got axed completely, to get to make a 2-hour movie. So I knew that what we had to do was look good.
Well, he's a visual.
It was up to them for the set to make the sound, and I thought, well, I've pretty much a good chance in the Judd Apatow movie that it's going to sound good as well.
Yeah.
So it did.
And the funny thing is, in the film, you said that you play an abject failure, as it were, and yet in real life, it's the complete opposite, which is great.
It's nice, yeah. I mean, I've always been successful
it's art in
a moderate kind of way. It's always been a kind of moderate. Kind of ticking along kind of way, and I've been quite happy with that over the last years. And then
as a songwriter,
as a songwriter, a lot of solo stuff where I've kind of cultured an audience to understand that I'll be doing a lot of stand-up comedy and a lot of songs that are very interesting from the mid-period, old ones that I expand on in different ways. Solo's been very good to me. Plus, you can earn a living, which with a band, unless you're doing,
And in the States, you've got the thing with geography, of course.
Geography it's an expensive thing with a band, but it's worth it because, we've just brought ourselves back as if there was no gap in a way.
Yeah.
Apart from we're all,
And the obvious question I've got to ask you, that everybody asks you, what was it like when you did come back together again? Was it just like it was the same, or because Martin Belmont, of course, has said that you've all grown as people, grown as musicians, you've had 30 years of a lifetime in between.
Yes.
Did that make things easier when you came back, or?
Yes, it did. Yeah. I mean, the great thing about this record was there was no producer. Not to knock any of the great producers.
No, but you have done in the past.
They've all been extremely talented. You just look back at it and go, ouch. There's a few things you look back on, but they've all been extremely talented and they've all done their best. But I've learned how to be a producer since then, in the kind of visionary sense of I know where my song goes. I don't need anyone else to hear it once and say, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
You don't need that. And with a great engineer, co-producer like Dave Cook, the band felt totally at home. Right. And they didn't have to think about some weird guy who's come there to change their sound. Yeah. Basically, my thought was, don't bother me with details, just press record.
Right.
And that's what we did.
So you're super confident.
And it was super confident, for some reason. Once I committed to it, at first I wasn't, because I listened to the songs and thought, what has this got to do with the rumour?
Right.
I had my doubts. There's a lot of dark moments before we got to the album. But then I realised I hadn't written Howling Wind, my first album, for the rumour either. Somebody pointed that out.
No, that was before. Yeah.
I just wrote the songs, so it was the same deal. Yeah. And they had a great time. They threw themselves into it.
Well, I'm thinking about just going to the DVD in a minute. Long Emotional Ride, for example, one of the new songs. Yeah. An integral part of that song is Bob Andrews' organ part.
And his backing vocal.
And his backing vocal.
It's very sweet.
That being the case, did you have to change some of the arrangements to fit the band?
No, basically that is as it was written. Right. Sometimes I'd have signature riffs that I'd go up to people and just say, try this, there's a thing going on here, try this little groove, something to Bob, maybe a few words, and then I'd just tell them to bring it. Because I wanted the rumour to express, their incredible creativity and the way they kind of, the complexity of the way they play. I wasn't going to say, no, we've got to have a pop hit.
No, it's a proper band.
I wasn't going to say, we've got to simplify it and have a pop hit. It was nothing like that.
Although, having said that, some of your newer material is very commercial. I don't mean that in a bad sense. I mean, far from some great hooks, some great melodies.
Stop Crying About the Rain. A lot of people like that instantly.
And Long Emotional Ride, which seems to be a look back on your career.
It is, yeah. It was actually inspired by seeing an early version of the documentary, when I realised that fans and friends had actually put in $45,000 on Kickstarter to fund this in very short order. Right. And people turned up to that who I didn't know had put lots of money in because they wanted to see a GP in the Rumour or just a Graham Parker documentary. That was before we reformed. It's been being made for 10 years. Yeah. And it kind of hit me. and it came out. The song came out, you know, and suddenly it was part of the dozen or so songs that me and the room were.
So the actual song came from real life in that respect.
It did, yeah.
Other times it come from riffs, I guess, and melodies and stuff.
Yeah,
like
there's a lot of, you know, people think
impetuses,
songwriting is true and real, but it's, you know, it's not really. It's like fiction to me. It's a grain of reality blown up out of all proportion. You know,
that's a good way of putting it.
But often there are songs that really are actually like that's real all the way through.
Yeah.
And Long Emotion Ride kind of feels like that. Even though some of the things like, you know, me saying I don't know, I had all these things going around in my head, and now I don't. That's bullshit. Of course I do.
No.
Just as messed up as anyone.
Yeah. So when you went to the States, was that partly to develop yourself as a songwriter, do you think?
No, it's just been one of those things where I'm you know, when you get older and 12 years seems like nothing. 12 years just disappeared, that's all it is. Yeah, it's like, has it really been that long? Or I better go back to England and do some gigs. It's just kind of sunk in, and America lends itself to touring.
Yeah.
With a band or without.
Right.
It's so easy.
There's
Solo, I would do 3 gigs in a weekend solo, where I could drive 4 hours, do a gig, stay in a hotel, get up the next day, drive another 2, drive 2 back, all in the tri-state area.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. And come back with made a living, you know.
And you've also had quite a lot of media over there, media attention. You've been on the Conan show and various things.
Yeah, we had a lot of that.
Was that before all this happened, or was that part of it?
That was with the rumour, yeah. But I used to be on David Letterman almost every year for about 8 years.
Oh, well, that certainly keeps the profile up.
Yeah, there was a lot of things.
And probably something you couldn't do over here, of course.
No, the States have been very good to me, but. You know, well, here we were just on Jules the other day, and that was a great thing for us.
That's an amazing thing to have.
That's good. They really wanted us on there, and you know, Mark Cooper, who's a producer there, got the documentary on the BBC, has been a great supporter. So it's fantastic to see the support for us here as well. And to be honest,
surprised at that?
Well, yeah, I was. I thought maybe we could do well in London, but we did well in Leeds, Glasgow, and Bristol. They were all great. So we'll see what happens in 2014. At the moment, we've got
plans to tour.
Well, the Shepherd's Bush Empire is on sale for July the 7th already.
Before the World Cup.
I'm
not sure about that. It doesn't matter.
When's the World Cup?
I think it's the 5th, but don't worry.
No, it's not.
It's not finished by then. I'm sure some canny promoters work that out.
This is the stuff that agents don't look at, or promoters. And then the gigs are happening and say, oh, it's a stiff, Graham. You know, the World Cup's happening.
No, it won't.
Oh, really?
You're all going to be there. I know you are. Going back to 1980 and the Up Escalades, which was probably one of your most successful albums in the States, if not over here. That was just, if I remember correctly, that was about the last time you actually played with the Rumour, wasn't it?
It was, but without Bob. We did 3 gigs, I think, for the Up Escalator. One was Rock Palace in Essen, Germany, and apparently 2 in the Hammersmith Palais, which I remember nothing about, with Nicky Hopkins on piano. I just read an excellent book about Nicky by Julian Dawson. It's really good.
Julian Dawson? That's a name from the past.
Yeah, he wrote a book called On Piano, Nicky Hopkins. And I got very friendly with Nicky. But that was the last gig me and the Rumour did.
And you wanted to work with other people at the time? You just wanted to go in a different direction? What was it?
Yeah, I think that 4 or 5 albums with one band, it just felt like enough to me.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see what my songs would sound like. I mean, it wasn't a case of, I don't like these people anymore. I did. No. Although we'd been on the road a bit too much. I think in 79 it was.
You've been doing a lot of
it was an entire year with a few gaps here and there, but that's enough to burn anyone out, you know. So it was time to stop.
And also you've done Squeezing Out Sparks, which I guess was your stellar album.
79, yeah, that was.
Did that feel like that to you at the time, that was your best album?
It felt like a very different album.
Right.
Now I look back on it, it seems like a bit of an anomaly to me. It seems out of place.
With the rest of the career?
Yeah, it does. I mean, we're not with all
interesting comment.
Because I've made lots of albums that have been more pop, rock, and some that have been very, very acoustic.
Yeah.
But if you listen to Howling Wind and 3 Chords Good, you might hear something, the similarities in the thread, in as much as we're a swing soul band.
Yeah.
And that's what we do the best.
And that's what you're doing now with the newer stuff.
That's what we're doing now. It really is. doing Lady Doctor on stage makes you realise nobody else is quite doing this.
Yeah.
But Squeezing Out Sparks, I think, was my attempt to get a bit new wave on you, because...
Well, you were very much, and of course you were part of that angry, what they call the angry young man
we
thing.
were called that, but musically we weren't. Musically we were
But
much
vocally,
denser.
you were more dense, that's true, but vocally you were very Costello, or he was very you at the time, at one point in
the
time.
attack of me was
that.
followed up by some of those new wave artists.
Yeah.
And some of those punk artists as
and
well.
I guess that's what was the key to your durability at the time, because when punk came along, it swept a lot of people away. But you were actually part of the catalyst almost.
We didn't disappear. Some people say punk killed you, but it's not true.
No.
The records sold more every time, and so did the audiences get bigger.
Yeah.
And a lot of the audiences, I remember playing in Brighton, all these people were spitting at me in '77. It was like they'd say, "Oh, this guy started this. He's a punk," and it's like, no. This is music, calm down, but they spat at me anyway.
The amazing thing is, before you signed with Stiff Records, and going back in time now, I think one of the original breaks was the fact that Charlie Gillett played a demo on the radio, and the actual concept of having a demo played on the radio
it's alien now, isn't it?
Totally alien.
Yeah, no.
But it had an amazing effect at the time.
There might be somebody in the provinces. There's a radio station in Surrey. I may be doing an interview with Broadlands or something, who have a show playing local talent who haven't been signed. So somebody's doing it. But that was in London with Charlie Gillett, who a lot of record companies had their eye.
Yeah, it was very hip at the time. Yeah.
Because Costello got played on there later.
And Mark Knopfler got the same break on that
show. And Knopfler did, yeah. So it was incredible. Out of nowhere, I was working in a gas station, and the manager said, "Well, I've just been played. We've got a record deal."
Yeah, Dave.
one play basically, and Dave was calling me at the gas station the petrol station, and telling me we'd got a record deal instantly, which I somehow knew we would.
You believed in yourself.
I was cocky. I believed in myself. I was 24 and it was like, okay, let's go in. You get going now or it ain't going to happen. So I was driven. I was absolutely driven.
And you still are, and that's why you're out there, which is fantastic. Going back to the soul and swing elements that you just emphasised as part of the new songs, of course that means you're going to have more mid-tempo songs, to be honest. Does that mean we're not going to hear Mercury Poisoning, New York Shuffle, Back to School Days anymore? Actually, Back to School Days would fit.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. I don't think New York Shuffle at that speed, but
it's a classic song.
I've just written a song with the same kind of groove, so I'm not ruling it out, but I don't think it's going to be me screaming. I'll be trying to actually sing.
You're more of a mature artist now, obviously.
And I think the band will be in control and will be playing with each other as opposed to against each other, which against each other forms great tension. And people like that, but you've got to realise now is now.
Yeah.
And even in the old days, we could do a song like Gypsy Blood. We could give it a lot of subtlety and nuance, and I think that's our priority, to keep bringing that out in the band.
Yeah, and I think that's you as a songwriter coming through.
It is. That's me as a songwriter. Don't panic and say, "Oh, they want Mercury Poisoning." No, it's not going to happen.
Right. Okay, you've heard it from Graham Parker. It's not going to happen.
But there's some lively stuff in the bag that I've written. We haven't recorded it yet, but there's some lively stuff.
The 12 songs that appear on This Is Live DVD, were they chosen to fall in line with the pacing of the film?
Well,
what was the thinking behind that?
Judd, likes to control things, and he sent me his ideas, all of which I said, they're good ideas, let's do them.
Right.
And he also included 5 new songs, or 3 or 4, whatever it was. And so the whole thing sat right to me, but it was basically his choices.
I asked you because of your new songs, Snake Oil Capital is one of your kind of reggae things.
Yes.
I thought that might have made the cut, just for...
Well, Brinsley had a theory there was going to be nothing edgy in it, apart from Protection, nothing that might be political.
Well, it's Hollywood after all.
It's Hollywood, and it wasn't going to suit the movie, so there was nothing that edgy, apart from Protection's nasty. Let's face it.
She Rocks Me could have been a Bob Dylan song, certainly the vocal on there. Has anybody ever said that to you?
The first time I played that to somebody, they said Paul Simon.
Paul Simon.
Like Paul Simon with throat cancer?
That's why I said Bob Dylan.
Okay, there you go.
Sorry, Bob, I didn't...
Well, we've got it all sewn up.
Going back to Squeezing Out Sparks again, we talked about, you had your arguments or views on producers and stuff, but Jack Nitz seemed to actually filled a niche on that
He
album.
did, yeah.
Horrible pun.
He did, but it took him 3 days. The first 3 days he was there all spaced out, you know, trying to figure out why he was there.
Right.
You know, he just didn't
And did you know him before you went into that?
I did. I'd met him briefly beforehand was when we looked for studios. But all I knew about him was he'd played with Tambourine on Satisfaction. He'd apparently done some arranging for Phil Spector.
He did, yeah.
I didn't know the huge history of the man, which is much bigger than I realised. Yeah. And he also produced what was widely thought of as a new wave record, which was a song called Mr. Jim by Mick DeVille.
Oh, right.
And I heard it on the radio, and I thought, I've got to get out of this R&B shtick with the horns. Yeah. I've got to make a simpler record. And
but did the horns come originally from the fact that you were a soul boy at one point?
Yeah, they came from that. Like, I was trying
John Osho.
Yeah, I was trying to reintroduce soul music, but in a different form. Because it wasn't there really in '75. It wasn't really there. Much.
No, I remember when you broke out. It was. How can I say? It wasn't a rehash. It was your own songs, but you revamped the genre.
We did. We revamped the genre with kind of attacking Dylan-esque kind of lyrics to it. So
I'd have to look it up, but you know, you go back in those days. The only other people doing that at the time was Southside Johnny.
Yeah, but the difference was they were more revival.
Yes,
you didn't have
and
the songs.
You had your own songs. Yeah.
So there was a difference there, but they were operating in America with a full horn section as well. Yeah. And that's somehow we ended up doing tours with them here.
You did, of course.
We did double bill tours.
Of course you did, yeah.
It's like, don't go by half measures.
and
all these horn sections everywhere drive you crazy.
And your whole career has been a kind of roadmap through different musical genres. Because at one time you were into psychedelia in your very early years.
Yeah.
And soul, then R&B, white boy soul, and then
and the British blues scene I liked a lot.
You did?
Peter Green was my idol.
Oh, I didn't know
Absolutely, I went to see him and Chicken Shack.
You would never have known that, and Stan Wood, you would never have known that with the tempos you were playing at.
No, I know. I didn't know how to slow down and play blues. That was my problem.
But presumably, as your songwriting became, you became more you're already confident. I can't say different to that. But as you became more of a mature songwriter, I guess you can lean back a little bit more, emphasise the lyrics, and not worry too much about.
Yeah. Well, you know, all of those influences have come into play slightly in all my work. You know, I mean, the blues thing, if you listen to Not If It Pleases Me on Howling Wind, you know, it's a blues tune.
Yeah.
Basically, we just kind of ended up doing them faster than any living human being should do them, really. So,
but was that partly to do with the fact you're on Stiff and you probably didn't have much of a budget?
Well, no, we weren't on Stiff. We were on Phonograph.
But I mean, originally,
all the albums on Phonograph. So there's plenty of budget. It's just that we speeded up once we got on stage. Is more like it.
Nervous energy.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where we felt like we had to ram it down their throats. I did, and the band that followed me.
But it was also part of the punk era, I suppose.
It predated it, and then it fit in with it.
Or new wave.
And then it fit in with it. My kind of thing at the time was to destroy progressive rock, which had become flatulent, you know, and sort of self-congratulatory. Whereas once it was cutting edge, it wasn't anymore by the time 72 came along.
No.
So I started writing songs to change the whole landscape a bit. Of course, the Sex Pistols really changed the landscape. Not me, but I was a small part of it, you know.
Also in your career, the other real noticeable thing is you've been on a whole bunch of different labels.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to ask you about, whatever happened at Atlantic when you actually didn't have a product? You were signed to them and nothing ever came out. What happened there?
Yeah, I've never been quite sure of that. What basically happened was I had a second manager then after Dave Robinson, who decided that it would be a good thing for me to work with the record company as opposed to what I've been doing, which has been basically take their money, make the record, and then they hear it when it's finished.
Not supposed to say that.
So I said, in an unguarded moment, I said, yeah, okay, let them hear some demos. Now to hear demos, for a record company to hear demos, a guy on an acoustic guitar basically playing the songs in 1986. It's a big mistake. Because
they were looking for the big drum sound.
People were making demos that cost $50,000 and then they'd make the album for $300,000. Well, I was making albums for $300,000, which I now know is a complete waste of money. But you know, my demos were still me and a guitar, and I'd play them to the musicians, and they would get it. But record companies then didn't get it, and Atlantic, they were riding high with the Phil Collins sound and Whitesnake, and they heard me with the guitar, and were like, "Don't get it, miss the songs. We don't know if the songs are good or not." So it just went through this whole, you know, rigmarole until finally I said to my manager, "I can't do this. You know, they shouldn't be listening to demos. They don't get it." And so he got me off the label with a chunk of money. And then I said, sign me to a label with less money. Give me less, but let me be independent now. You know, they're not going to help me in that sense. They can only help me financially. That's all I want, support for the records. And they sort of RCA came along in the US, and they did it.
And that kick-started another part.
And then we did the Mona Lisa Sister, which was a success.
Hugely underrated album.
It was a success. I mean, it was one of the biggest tours we did. You know, not me in the room, but me with Brinsley and Andrew in the US. We were packing places out. It was a nice revival.
84, would that be?
It was 88. And songs on that record got used on alternative compilations. So it was on alternative with the Smashing Pumpkins. New Audience would come in. And that was, so we made something out of the very bad thing, which is the 80s. And made something out of it.
And in that respect, well, a little bit later you actually signed to another indie label. You have to tell me the name of it, something Thai.
Razor and Thai. Yeah.
Was that another step towards your artistic independence?
Well, that was the first real indie label apart from one record on Stiff, The Up Escalator, which happened, you know, late in my career with The Room at the end record. So it was the first time I realised by then that major labels weren't interested in me and many other acts like that.
The landscape had changed.
The landscape seriously changed, and they even admitted to me. I talked to people at major labels and said, "You're not going to do anything for me if you sign me." And they said, "No, that's right. Go with an indie label." So I said, "Great, easy, no problem." So you go with indie labels, you make records cheaper, and then the internet came along, everything worked hand in glove, fine.
And you've been very proactive in that, which brings us round to your YouTube show again.
My YouTube show.
How did that come about? You suddenly got into comedy, didn't you?
Yeah, it's a man with too much time on his hands.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, as hard as I work, I've often had 6 months of the year to do things like playing a soccer team in upstate New York.
Right.
Football, sorry.
Yeah.
You know, very highly competitive indoor or outdoor leagues. Learn to ski, which I'm pretty decent at, downhill skiing.
Which is featured in your show,
of course. And then in my spare time, make the sunglasses, the Graham Parker show, of course. You know. And write enough songs to make an album a year.
And coming back...
Piece of cake.
Well, you say piece of cake. I mean, the last question was, that when you came back together with The Room, you cut something like 13 songs in no time at all.
About 9 days or something.
9 days. And so you really were on the button, all of it.
It was like the Beatles. They used to make an album at lunchtime, didn't they? And the Ruggles took longer. I'm taking 9 days. I'm indulgent, man.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Graham. It's been Pete Feenstra talking to Graham Parker. The DVD is called This Is Live.
Yes.
Live, I should say. The album's called Three Chords Good.
3 Chords Good. Exactly.
And the film is...
This Is 40.
So there's a hat-trick of things there you can go out and see. Anything else we should mention?
The documentary will eventually make it to DVD. That's called Don't Ask Me Questions, and has been on the BBC, as you know. And
gigs. You're doing another tour next year?
Yeah, end of May into June, and we'll see how they shape up. But already... One Shepherd's Bush Empire is on sale.
What's it? I think
7th of June, I believe.
7th of June.
So, no peace for the wicked.
It's been Pete Feenstra.
It's time for a nap now, though. I'm a bit, you know.
GetReadyToRock.com. Talking to Graham Parker, who's been an absolute joy.
Thanks, man.
Thank you to Mary on the camera. MPH on the photos over there.
That bloke over there.
Mark Hughes, not the footballer. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
Cheers, man.